Welcome everyone to AFM's weekly virtual trainings. Thank you for attending. Please introduce yourself here with your name and where you are from. Do that in the chat. You may also use that chat feature to ask any questions or make any observations about the training content. A reminder, your name on your Zoom screen is the name that will be on your certificate. If you have others watching on your screen, please send their names to Mike Cull, and I'll put Mike's email address in the chat as the program is underway. So on that note, I'm going to go ahead and first introduce Jose, although I think probably everybody knows Jose. Jose will offer us some words of encouragement. Jose, I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks, Howard. I truly appreciate you. And hey, my mentor, Brad Banz, thanks for coming. You're a busy man. Thank you for finding time. I truly appreciate you. You're a man who always encourages me. So just for today, I just need you to humble yourself. Let me encourage you.
You're putting pressure on me, Jose. Love you, brother.
My fellow firefighters, you guys, this week has really been quite tough, eh? But then one thing that we need to understand and realize, we are stronger than ever. We are stronger and we should stand strong as brothers and sisters in the service. And this is something about, I was just thinking about excellence. And then excellence in the fire service, in what we do, what does it really mean? And I came to realize it's just, it falls under these two things, which are those consistency and planning ahead. You can't have one without the other. You can't have consistency and you miss planning ahead. Whether it is putting your PPE within the next 1 minute, or it's pulling the hose lines, checking your BA, even though we never use our BAs often, checking and exercising on it, not forgetting school drills, going to a school, asking them for permission and saying, hey, we need to have a school drill in this school. That is actually, you're consistent in going to teach these children, but then also you're planning ahead, like, what if there's a fire in these schools? What are you gonna do? You remember what Cohen taught us last weekend about pre-planning and all those things? That is actually not forgetting you being consistent and planning ahead. You should always take your station drills to the heart. Don't just sit there like a couch potato that there's no fire. Just tell yourself, I want to do some ropes. I want to do some laying of the hoses. I want to do something on these residential flats that are next to me. Through that, you're actually preparing and planning ahead. And without knowing, you're actually being consistent. You're making that muscle be so effective. So, hey, my colleagues, every shift, every call, and every time, please don't forget these two items. Which are those? Consistency and planning ahead. Thank you, guys. Back to you, Chief Howard.
Thanks, Jose. And everything you're saying is totally spot on true. And thank you for the shout out to referring to my training last week. I follow it up next week with what you do after the fire. Talked about one before, so we'll talk about overhaul and salvage next week. In the meantime, I've put Mike Cull's email address in the chat, so if you need it to include other people's names, it's there. I'll put it in again. I'll also put some other links in the chat as the program goes on. I'll try and do it more than once so that as chat conversations build, the information doesn't get buried too far deep. And on that note, it's my pleasure to introduce Chief Brad Banz, someone I've gotten to know over the years on my journeys to Kenya. It's amazing that he just practically lives around the corner to me here in the United States, but I only see him when I'm in Nairobi with Africa Fire Mission trips. It's a fellow that I've, like Jose, as a mentor. I've learned a lot from him. He's a very experienced chief, both as a volunteer and career departments. Continues to be a great asset to his community and to Africa Fire Mission, and just a great guy to be hanging out with. So, on that note, Brad, I'm going to turn it over to you. You should be able to share your slides now, and once you're up and running, I will turn off my video and audio.
See if I can throw that up there. I can find it.
Oh, let me just remind everyone.
There we go.
Make sure you're muted. You're muted. Y'all set? Yeah. Okay. You're up there.
There we go. So thank you very much. You guys are humbling me. You guys are both great guys to be with. Jose and I have known each other for a long time. Jose is a great asset to the Kenyan and African Fire Service. He's done so much for you guys, and I've really enjoyed just knowing him as a firefighter and as a friend. So anyway, so I appreciate him, appreciate the words that he's given us this morning. So anyway, so moving on, this morning, I want to talk a little bit about offensive and defensive strategies in firefighting, and a lot of times what we think about when we're discussing these strategies, we think about in structure fires. And so it's not just in structure fires that we can think about these strategies, but there's other types of firefighting that we can use these tactics, or the offensive and defensive, but in other types of fires as well. So when you do your size up, you usually have to set some sort of a strategy, and it's going to be some sort of an offensive or defensive strategy. So that's what we want to get into this morning. So anyway, talk about our objectives. We get started with our program this morning. Going to basically go over our definition of what an offensive and defensive strategy is. Hit on risk versus benefit. Talk a little bit about that. That's going to help us define our strategy. Do some factors, talk a bit about factors influencing our decision making, as far as which way we want to go with it, and some offensive and defensive tactics. So let's go ahead and move on in. So first, let's define an offensive fire attack or an offensive strategy. Basically, an offensive strategy is going to be an aggressive strategy that's going on and attacking a fire at its source. So we'll just show you a little video of somebody that's taking up an offensive strategy out in the field here. These guys are on a structure fire. You can see they're making entry into this house. They're going after this fire. They're going into this structure and they're attacking this fire at its source. So in the US, they're starting to, I know in Kenya, you're starting to see some wood frame construction. And that's what we're looking at here. This is a wood frame construction here. They're pulling the ceiling of this building with hooks and getting up and finding the hidden fire is what they're doing here. Exposing that hidden fire. So anyway, that would be what we would consider to be an offensive form of fire attack. Okay. Now, a defensive fire attack, on the other hand, it's a less aggressive strategy. And what we're going to concentrate on is more of preventing the spread of fire. So if you think about it, when you look at what the fire service is going to do, our priorities is life safety, incident stabilization, and property conservation. So the defensive fire attack would a lot of times fall into that realm of incident stabilization and possibly property conservation. So we'll show this video. This is once again, it's a structure fire. So the alpha side would be the front side of the house. Bravo would be the left, Charlie would be the back, and Delta would be the right as you look at it from the front. You notice that these guys in this particular situation are hitting it from the outside. So not necessarily are you always going to make a defensive fire attack on a structure from the outside. You could be on a larger structure, you can make a defensive fire attack from the inside. And vice versa on an offensive attack, you can also make an offensive attack from the outside. So this is just the examples that I gave here. So you notice that there's this house over to the right. So what they're going to concentrate on is trying to protect this house over here on the right-hand side from catching fire and burning down. So this is a defensive strategy they're using. Notice the wind's coming from left to the right. So they have to work to try to keep that house from burning down on the right here. And I don't know that they necessarily do all that great of a job. They probably should have concentrated on maybe getting another hand line over there. Now they're actually coming inside. So once again, this is a wood frame structure. So they're opening up the attic to make sure that the fire hasn't gotten up into the attic above the living space. Okay, so that would be that would be an example of a defensive attack on a structure. Okay, let's move on and say if you guys have any questions about that, try to post them up. Howard, can you keep an eye on and monitor if there's any questions on offensive versus defensive? Let's talk a little bit about risk versus benefit. And what we're talking about, what we want to use the risk benefit when we evaluate whether or not we want to go offensive versus defensive is how much risk we want to take versus the benefit of what we're going to get out of taking that risk. Okay. And I've given some examples of the risks that we want to take over here on the left-hand side. Okay. So some of the risks that we might have to take are the risk to your firefighters, the risk to the victims, and the risk to the public. Okay. And what are the benefits that we're going to get out of taking those risks? Okay. Down here, a viable rescue. Okay. And what I mean by a viable rescue is somebody that we know that we are actually going to be able to rescue that has a chance at living. Okay. If you have, for example, a fire in a structure or in an area that's totally overrun that structure, and it's totally involved, the chances of that patient, if there was somebody in there being viable, is probably not going to be good versus, say, a 1 or 2 room fire in a structure where you might have somebody that might be in another room. That would be the benefits of going in there and stopping that fire and being able to rescue somebody. There might be a viable rescue there. Okay. Salvageable property. Okay. Once again, if there's a fairly large amount of property that might be saved, go ahead and maybe make that attack. Okay. So that's what we're talking about as far as risks and benefits. So you can see on my little drawing here, I put up here on the high, I've got low risk, maybe high benefit. Yeah, maybe we can go. Okay. The higher the risk, maybe the lower the benefit of us going. That's kind of the way we want to evaluate it. That's not necessarily always going to be true. Maybe there's going to be some circumstances where we want to take a little more risk and go. But that's kind of the scale that we want to play this out as. Okay. The more risk we want to take, the more we want to think about going offensive with this. Okay. That's kind of how we want to think along those lines. Down here at the bottom, over here, risk a little to save a little, risk a lot to save a lot. Is kind of the theme we want to use as well. Okay. So there again, if anybody's got any questions about that, please let me know. Station officers, this is a big decision that you've got to make. Okay. Station officers and chief officers, that's a big decision. And that's going to change. That can change throughout. That can change throughout that incident too. Okay. Okay, let's go ahead and move on. Okay. So So going offensive versus defensive. We want to weigh those risks versus benefits, okay? Digging down a little bit deeper, drilling down a little bit deeper into this. Life safety. First thing is the life safety benefit to your firefighters. Number one, life safety to your victims. Number two, okay? If your firefighters can't get in safely, then they're of no use to the victims, right? So that's why life safety of your firefighters is most important. Okay. Adequate resources. Do you have the adequate resources to be able to go offensive? That's something to weigh. If you can't go, if you don't have the adequate resources to go, then you might weigh towards going defensive. Hey, what about the weather? Weather's going to play in, especially when we start thinking about bushfires. We start thinking about bushfires. Weather really plays into that. If you have a structure fires as well, if you have a big wind-driven fire event, you're going to have to start thinking about going defensive. If you have structures next to the one that's on fire, you're going to have to think about going defensive on the structures next door. So that's all that plays into it as well. Okay, changing fire conditions. This is a big one right there. You have to be able to read that fire. Okay, always think about the changing fire conditions. If you think something looks like it's going to go bad, then definitely think about going defensive. Okay. If it looks like it's a fairly stable condition, you have the resources. Okay. Things look safe to your firefighters, go offensive. If not, go defensive. The structural conditions. If it looks like something's about to collapse, you always check your structural conditions before you make entry. If the floor is not sound, if it looks like the wall's about to fall down, go defensive. If not, everything else is good here, might wait towards going offensive. Okay. All things to think about. So let's look at some offensive strategies here. Okay, here's a little structure fire. So first thing we want to think about, I want to make sure if you're going to go inside on this, we have the proper PPE. So it looks like these guys have turnout gear. They got BAs, helmets, everything. Okay, what about the fire conditions here? It looks like maybe they've got a single room and contents. Looks like the roof. Let's say the fire conditions, looks like they just, yeah, like a single room and contents. Structural conditions. Structure looks stable to me. Doesn't look like the structure is about to fall down. Say because it's a single room and contents, appears to be without walking around. You always want to do a good walk around to see what you have. Always want to do a 360. So you could have a viable rescue if it's just a single room and contents. And make sure and have a good water supply too if you want to go offensive. Okay. If you think you can knock that down. So if you have 1,000 liters If it's just a single room and contents, you might be able to knock that single room and contents down with 1,000 liters. But if you have a fire any bigger than that, you probably ought to think about not doing that with just 1,000 liters unless you can get some more there. So think about your water supply too. Okay. So here's a good one here. So if you have a vehicle or a lorry on fire, like just a car, when I say what I mean by vehicles, it's like a car or a matatu when I talk about a vehicle or a lorry. So there again, proper PPE if you're going to go in and attack this thing head on. So these guys have BAs, so they could get in a little closer. You can knock it down without BAs, but you want to make sure you're upwind. What about hazmats, especially on the lorries? Hazmats for sure. Okay, both the cargo and the vehicle. So you want to evaluate that. If you guys don't have the DOT guidebook or the DOT app, so we can talk a little bit. That's a separate conversation, but evaluate that if there's any chance there might be hazmats. Victims. If you have victims, you want to evaluate that. Okay. And there again, water supply. Make sure that you have enough water to be able to go in and get that. Okay. Bushfires. So direct attack on a bushfire. So if you do a direct attack on a bushfire, that's an offensive fire attack. So you're using water or hand tools on this bushfire here, and you're putting it directly on that fire. Okay, so you can go in and do that if you have like slow to moderate winds, where it's not moving that fire at a very rapid rate. 1 to 1.5 meter flame height. You want a low flame height. You want to watch the amount of fuels you have. If it's really heavy fuel, and usually if you get into the heavier fuels, it's going to be a higher flame height, especially with any wind. And you want to have adequate manpower to be able to do it. So, and that's going to be your direct attack on a bushfire. And reading this is actually at Savo West. These guys are at. It looks like they're using fire beaters here. Okay, let's get into some defensive strategies. Okay, so you get into the defensive, talk a little bit about PPE. So you still want to have some kind of PPE on, but you wouldn't necessarily have to have a BA. If you don't have a BA, probably you want to do a defensive. Probably want to do a defensive if you don't have BA. Okay, so in this top picture, you got heavy fire conditions. Look at these structural conditions too. This roof has come in on this. maybe the walls and back, you can't tell for sure, but definitely the roof. Okay. How about the other structures? Other structures threatened. Look at the picture in the bottom here. For sure, the other structures are threatened here. So you're one of your priorities, and look at the involvement on this one as well, on the one on the bottom. Fully involved. So are either one of these, they're not supportive of life. So we wouldn't be able to make a viable rescue on either one of these. So are you risking, is it worth risking putting anybody in there when you're probably not going to be able to make a rescue? Probably not. And water. Okay, if you don't have enough water to make a offensive fire attack, which you're not going to make an offensive attack on either one of those anyway. If you don't have enough water to make an offensive fire attack, then don't risk your firefighters by going in. Just hit the structures, hit your exposures, keep them cool. Okay. Okay, so show you attack fire here. For sure, you want to have some kind of PPE. If you don't have BAs, you definitely want to stay upwind. Okay, hazmats, we don't know what's in these tanks. There again, you want to try to get with the property rep, your DOT guidebook, your app, figure out what to do. Exposures. For sure, you have this tank over here. You want to keep it cooled down. You want to have a good water supply. If you don't have a good water supply, most likely this facility is going to have something that you can hook up to. But if you don't have a good water supply, that one's probably going to overheat. You need to get everybody out. But so that's another defensive strategy in itself, is just to evacuate everybody. Okay, that's not necessarily putting water on it, but evacuation can be a good defensive strategy in its own. And these guys are even probably going a little bit on the offensive side here because they're applying foam, trying to extinguish it. But they're also in a defensive strategy by cooling this tank over here. Okay, bushfires. So defensive strategy in a bushfire, you're going to be going more on an indirect mode when you're in defensive mode on a bushfire. And on big ones, you're going to see that a lot. Okay, so you're going to be trying to ring up, put a control line all the way around the bushfire. And you'll be trying to stop that fire by doing a lot of firing operations and just a lot of those control lines. What I didn't put in there, you'll be doing a lot of what they call structural protection as well. Putting lines around homes, keeping vegetation away from homes as well, trying to save those. Okay. So this is indicated if you have high winds, where that fire is moving so fast that you can't keep ahead of it. If you have high flame heights, heavy fuel loading, and if you have what's called crowning and spotting, and this is going to be, the crowning is if you're out in the in the wooded areas, a lot of trees, and it's going from the tops of the trees to the top to the top to the top of the next tree. That's crowning. And spotting, where you have the fire jumping on over your line and jumping ahead of your line, causing spot fires. Okay, that's all indications that you need to go to an indirect attack mode to a defensive mode. You can see these guys are building, cutting in line right here. You can do it by hand when you cut line in. If you have tractors, they can use a plow, or if you have dozers available that can cut control line in, whatever means. You can see these guys down here, and you can use natural barriers as well, and tie in off of natural barriers as part of a control line as well. You can see down here, these guys, they have a little bit of a natural barrier, a trail or something here, and they're lighting, doing a firing operation off of this barrier here and burning out between this barrier and where the fire is, burning that fuel out. Okay, so I want to talk a little bit about a transitional attack. Okay, and what that is where you start on a defensive attack and then you transition over to an offensive attack. So if you have a fire where maybe you have a little bit more fire showing, and you need to control it from the outside, then you can move in and finish it off. Then you can consider doing the transitional attack. So I'll show you a video on that. This is kind of a good video that helps explain it. So the whole house isn't involved. You got the porch. You see how hitting it from the window, knocking it down, knocking the porch, the fire on the porch down there. Now they've knocked it down enough from the outside. This is where you transition. That's why they call it transitional attack. Now they can transition. Now they can transition into the house. Still a lot of fire, but they've knocked it down to the point where they can go in and finish it off inside. There's still a lot of fire across that ceiling. So it looks like that guy there with the fog pattern, he has it directed towards the window. It looks like he's doing a little bit of hydraulic ventilation there. So when you're doing that transitional attack, the same rules apply as far as doing that offensive attack. You want to evaluate your structure for structural integrity. Obviously you want to have your full PPE on to go in, and you want to evaluate for changing conditions and all of that as well before you just go on in. And you want to continue to evaluate as you go along there. If it looks like something's going to change and you need to pull back out and go defensive again, get back outside. Okay. Anyway, but I wanted to show you guys that transitional attacks work well if you don't have as much manpower, as much staffing. I know in many areas of Africa that is an issue. You guys don't have a lot of manpower. That's something to think about. Where you can knock that fire down from the outside and then advance in to finish it off. So that's why another reason I wanted to show that to you. But there again, you still have to have BAs to go in and finish that off. Okay, so that's, like I said, that's something I wanted to show you guys. Whoops. Okay. Okay, so there's some questions up on the board here, I think. Looks like everybody's introducing themselves. Go through here. Looks like we have a good group here. Anybody have any questions?
If you have questions, but you can't, it's not convenient to write them into the chat, go ahead and
Yeah, you can write them in the chat.
you can also unmute yourself and ask. And if you use the reacts, and you can put a thumb up also, and then we can unmute you and call on you. So if you have any questions or comments, go ahead and unmute. Adlino has his hand up. Go ahead and unmute yourself.
Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon.
Good to see you.
How are you?
I'm doing great. How are you this morning or afternoon? It's morning for me.
My afternoon is doing well. Yeah, sorry, man. I just logged on now. Yeah, I just wanted to ask during transitional what transitional attack. What are the first tactics that you have to do first?
You want to make sure, obviously you want to knock down that fire from the outside. First, you're going to treat it like a defensive attack. You want to knock that fire down from the outside, and evaluate to make sure that it's safe to enter. You want to evaluate that it's safe enough to enter before you make entry. But you always want to knock it down from the outside first. In that video, the firefighter knocked that fire down on the outside of the structure. And he knocked it down, anything that was venting from the window before entering the structure. And then evaluated to make sure it was safe to make entry into the structure. The structure had good, the integrity of it was safe enough to enter the house. So does that make sense?
It makes very good sense, sir. Thank
Okay.
you very much.
Yes, you're welcome. Good question. Good question.
Anybody else got some questions that they or comments? Oh, Timmy's got his hand up. Go ahead and unmute yourself.
Go ahead, Timmy.
Go.
Hello, everyone. I presume you are all well. Thank you for the lesson. The first question
welcome.
is, if we have a scenario whereby we have a building which is on fire and it has two exits. So the first exit, the building has been completely blocked by the fire, and we have the other exit which has not been completely consumed by the fire. Can we use both the offensive and defensive so that we can meet the fire at the center?
Okay, so yeah, you want to obviously you would want to try to go in. You want to try to go in the exit that hasn't been blocked, if possible, and try to push that fire out the exit that has been blocked. I would assume. You're saying the one exit's been blocked by fire, probably?
Yes.
Yeah. I would try to, probably, if it were me, probably try to go in the one that hasn't been blocked and try to push it out that way. If I could do an offensive attack. If I could do an offensive attack.
I'd add it to that, Brad and Tim. If the obvious second exit is blocked, maybe there's a less obvious, entry or exit point. For
Yeah.
example, a window, or
Yeah.
maybe you can put a hole in the wall to create an access point. So
Yeah.
so take that, keep that option in mind.
Yeah.
There's a Brad. We have a question in the chat. I'll
Okay.
read it to you. Just say how about the
So
sneeze thing.
one other thing,
ahead.
Timmy, something you can do to keep that fire from spreading if you can't go offensive, would be to use ventilation. And that's to cut a hole on the end of the building where that fire is and draw that fire out. And then put a line in and push from the non-involved side, put it in the window on the non-involved side, put a hole towards the end where the fire is involved at, and push that fire out that way, and that's going to stop it from moving. Does that make sense?
Brad, we got a couple of questions in the chat.
Okay. Okay.
I'll read the first one to you. This is from Joseph.
Okay.
Hi, just want to ask, beyond the obvious considerations of life safety and property conservation, what are the most critical other factors that lead an incident commander to decide or choose an offensive over a defensive fire attack, or to switch from one to the other? And what are the specific immediate tactical changes that must occur for a safe and effective transition?
That's a good question. So probably the most obvious would be that if you have the fire conditions are going to be changing in the building, You always have to evaluate fire changes and structural changes within that structure. You always want to continue to evaluate those changes, and if you have to make a sudden exit because of a deterioration in either one of those conditions, that's when you want to go from offensive to defensive.
Yeah, I'll add into that if you don't mind, Brad.
Yeah, go ahead.
There's a fire department in California that was fighting a fire in a library. It was after hours. There was no one in the building, but they were fighting it offensively. They wanted to save the building, but unfortunately, a couple firefighters ended up dying. So that department decided that, if there's no life at risk, and then depending on the fire load, they're just going to go defensive. So
Yeah.
one of those issues might be, is there a reason at all to go
Yeah.
offensive? So
Yeah, and that's
that's a tough call.
that's that risk benefit that you have to take. That's that
Yep.
risk benefit that you have to take.
One of the things. Oh, sorry, Brad.
No, that's
Yeah. One of the other things, in places where there's a lot of abandoned houses, you just think no one's possibly living there. Departments have to decide, gee, it's an abandoned place. Should I go in and look for potential victims or patients? That's one of those calls too. And some urban departments here in the United States, they really struggle with that because those buildings are dangerous, but there might be people in there. So
yes.
they're trying to assess that risk thing.
Yes.
So one of the things they
That's
rely on is the feedback from people around them. Hey, have people been going in there? Have people been using
Yeah.
that kind of stuff? Got some
Yeah,
more questions for you, Brad. I'm sorry.
that's becoming in Wichita, the department that I retired from, that's becoming a struggle with those guys because the homeless population in the downtown area is growing.
Yeah.
And a lot of those homes in the downtown, abandoned homes in the downtown area, the homeless people will live in those abandoned homes like that. And they'll have multiple fires in those. They'll go and start a fire. The guys will put it out, and maybe a few days later they'll have another fire. So that's becoming an issue.
Got a couple more questions for you that popped up. This is from Elfas. How do you determine if the offensive attack should be abandoned? And how do you determine the safest entry point for an offensive operation? Those are his two questions.
Those are good, both good questions.
One more question
Wow.
coming up also for someone else.
Yeah, so I think that the offensive attack, if it should be abandoned, we were kind of hitting on that already. Once again, you have to continue to evaluate your fire conditions. If you're not making what we would call making headway here in the United States, if you're not making progress, the fire's not, the fire is gaining on you. The fire conditions are continuing to get worse. Despite things that you're trying to do to attack it, say, for example, if you've brought a second line in to try to attack it, it's still getting worse. You ventilated, it's still getting worse. Structural conditions are getting bad. Then it's time to consider getting out and going defensive on it. Those are all things you want to consider. Because the fire's gaining ground and it's the safety of your firefighters obviously is being jeopardized.
Got one more question in the chat, Chief, and this is from Chief Waco. He says, thank you for your consistent empowerment. And then he asks, as an incident commander, how can you communicate the transition strategy on the fire ground?
The transition strategy, that's indeed, that's an issue. One way to do it, especially since a lot of the firefighters there do not have radios. What we do here in the US, even in addition, because we do have radios, we will sound three tones on our horns on our apparatus. Three loud long blasts on the horns on our apparatus, and that indicates that we're going to go defensive.
That's great. Brad, I think that's it on the questions. We're at 10 o'clock, so we're going to officially kind of wrap things up. Once again, I want to thank you, Chief Banz, for sharing your wisdom and experience with everybody. And I want to thank all of you for sharing your time. I hope we used it wisely. And I have put in the chat a couple of times the various links that are of value that you could use to get copies of this recording, of this video, get other information that might be available, and also to invite people to participate. Plus, there's an evaluation in there. We'd love to hear from you. And so next week, you get me again, and we're going to wrap up with looking at overhaul and salvage, which is what you do after the fires are out. On that note, I am going to stop the recording and invite everybody to stick around for tea time. I know we have Jose and Cyrus are here, and Chief Banz, who maybe will stick around for as long as he can. And then
Yeah, I want to.
continue to ask your questions. You can raise up other issues, or you can just make some connection. So on that
Yeah.
note, I'm going to end the recording, and wish you all well. And for those of you who are in Kenya, stay safe with the current uprising going on. And everybody else also stay safe with everything that you do.